Okay, so hi everybody. I am constantly going to be adjusting my glasses. I have another sty. Oh, it's okay. It's my own fault. I was like, I'm going to keep wearing contact lenses, and then I'm surprised when stuff like this happens. Honestly, my glasses are super cute. You should see them more often. That's how I'm going to treat it. But it does mean occasionally I am going to take them off because they are fogging up. So this is the last class before our exam. I am a little concerned we may not have time to cover everything that I want to cover. So whatever I don't finish, I will record on a video later this afternoon. I'll record it from my office. And hopefully it shouldn't take more than 20 minutes to watch. And if you don't have time to watch it, if you have any questions on any of the stuff in the study guide, we will be doing our review session tomorrow night. So I go to yoga and I don't get done until about 6:30. Do y'all want to have a review session at 6:45? Is that good for everybody? Now, here's my question. Would you want this in person or would you prefer it over Zoom? You want here? Yeah. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that. I'll make sure to have this mask with me. If anybody wants, so those of you who are on video right now, that will be watching this later, if any of you are not able to make it, somebody in class can record for you if you would like. So be sure to let me know by tomorrow night and I can record it for you. Or rather, somebody in the class will record it for you. Yeah.
Quick question. How long do you think it'll be?
About an hour. If you have to leave a little early, that's okay. Stay what you can make time for. Yeah, Staley.
Where will it be?
Student lounge. Student lounge. So just right over there with all the comfy chairs. We can sit on the floor. It'll be a good time. If you want to bring stuff over from Shelley Club, that's fine. I would prefer we not have it in Shelley Club just because it can be a little noisy. They were moving a refrigerator yesterday. It was pretty awesome. Okay. So in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and say 6:45. So it'll be 6:45 to 7:45. Maybe if you're lucky, you will get a Smedley sighting after. Somebody might want to pick me up. So you might get to see Smedley. But we'll see what happens. So if you can't make it, feel free to shoot me an email with any questions you have on the study guide. Now, here's my general rule. With study guide questions, sometimes people send me a long, long list of study guide questions. And I'm like, have you tried to look for the answers yourself first? If the answer is no, don't send me the list of questions. Make a good faith effort to try to find the answers yourself before you ask me. Because I have 3 exams to give this week, which means I have a lot of review sessions. I have a lot of things to make copies of, and it means that I may not have as much time as I normally would to answer a long, long list of questions. So just kind of keep that in mind. Try to do your own research using the textbook and your notes before you come and talk to me. Yes?
So when I was going through the PowerPoints a couple of days ago,
yeah,
I noticed that some of the pictures are missing.
Yeah, I kind of did that to cut down on the file size for you. I don't think the picture should be a big deal unless you need help drawing a neuron. Because I think that's the only picture you might really need. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and we are going to talk some more. We talked about Piaget last time. What's really funny is that when I went through working on the captions yesterday, they called Piaget PHA. So I had to constantly change PHA to Piaget. Okay, so I think you're going to like this section. We are moving on to talking about social development. And in particular, what we're going to talk about here are attachment styles and also how parenting kind of plays a role with this. So one of the things that we know, babies have different temperaments. So hopefully you've been reading this in your book. I will have uploads of MP3s for you from the book. It may be from the previous edition. but they should cover roughly the similar stuff. There just might be some different phrasing, but you ought to be all right. So one of the things that we know is that once infants get the ability to start exploring their world and moving around, and they can actually start to control their environment, they've developed that sense of object permanence, something kind of interesting happens where they get what's called stranger anxiety. They don't like being around people that are not their caregivers or people that they are not familiar with. And so one of the reasons that this has been suggested to happen is that we start to form an idea of who our caretakers are. So remember how last week we talked about schemas? The idea that we have an idea of a concept. So for example, the schema for cow, the schema for moose. Well, it turns out we have schemas for caregivers as well. And these schemas form very early. As a result, we have an idea of who our caregiver is and who our caregiver is not. And we end up developing this fear of strangers at about 8 months old. Now, for most of us, that is eventually going to go away. For some of us, it's going to take a little longer. My sister, when she was a kid, was very, very shy. Dr. Gilchrist was not. If you can believe this, I got this honestly, folks. When I was in kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher did like the equivalent of senior superlatives. You know, like when you were in high school, you got most likely to succeed and stuff like that. Here are 2 fun facts about me. First of all, in my senior year, I was voted most likely to be teaching at my high school in 5 years. I can't tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm going to assume they thought I would be a wonderful teacher, which I hope I am. But in kindergarten, I was voted most enthusiastic. You don't say. But my sister, on the other hand, super shy, and it took her a while to come out of that. Most of us will get better with stranger anxiety after about 8 months, and especially once we're able to move around and communicate. So this idea that we become very distressed when we are not around our caregivers indicates that we have formed what is referred to as an attachment. So when we are around people that we see quite a bit and they take care of us and they comfort us and they cuddle with us, we can develop an attachment. So an attachment is defined as having an emotional tie to another person. How do you know that you have developed an attachment to a person? You generally seek to be close to them. You want to be around them. And when they're not around, you become a little upset or distressed. And that's especially true with infants. And generally, we're going to find that this attachment is especially going to be the case for parents and also other close relatives that are present. So in my case, my caregivers not only included my mother, but to a lesser extent, my father, when he wasn't on a tour because he was in the military. And then also my grandparents who spent a lot of time taking care of me. So I had attachments to all of those people. One nice thing I will say about these clear panels, y'all get to, it's an excuse to wear lipstick. And because I'm wearing glasses, I'm like, today's a bright lipstick day. Okay, everybody good here? Okay, I will wait. I will wait. I got my hand out. I will wait. Oh, hey. Either today or tomorrow, happy first day of fall. Happy vernal equinox. Or autumnal equinox. Vernal is spring. I don't know what I was thinking. Ooh. All right, you good? Okay, cool. Okay, so one of the things that we know that is really, really critical for building attachment is contact comfort. So if you are a parent, having actual physical contact with your child can really help form a bond. Research has actually found that for premature babies that are in areas like the NICU, skin-to-skin contact with those infants can actually help them thrive and help them improve. So the thing is, this is really kind of important here. So this is based off of the work of Harry Harlow. And I am going to show you a video of some of the work that he actually did with monkeys. And this is the first time you are going to hear me use this phrase, and you will repeatedly hear me use this throughout the semester. You could probably not do this study today. But he actually took orphaned monkeys and basically was trying to figure out what's more important for developing an attachment. Is it giving your infant the things that it requires, food, nourishment, water, and things like that? Or is it that contact comfort? And as Harry Harlow discovered, attachment develops not through, obviously getting nourishment is important for an infant's ability to thrive, but attachment forms with contact comfort. Touch, physical touch is really important for helping us build relationships with other people. And in the case of developing parental attachments or caregiver attachments, comfort is key. And what we find is that infants that develop these kinds of attachments feel that their caregiver is a safe place. And once they are in that safe place, they can gradually explore the world around them and return to their caregivers when they are distressed or worried or anxious. So I'll let you write this down, and then we are going to watch a video. So I'll go ahead and pause share. And we will watch a video. Everybody good? Okay. Huh? Open hyperlink. Haha. No, every time. Okay. It worked last year. I'm not just making that up. It did actually work last year. Here. Yep. Here we go.
Let me show you a monkey raised on a nursing wire mother. Now here are 106's two mothers. As you can see, it was weaned on a wire mother.
Okay, so I'm going to pause that really quick. So here's what they're basically saying. These monkeys are orphaned. They do not actually have actual monkeys as caregivers. They are being taken care of by a researcher. These monkeys have been weaned, so they've been basically nourished with food and water through that wire mother. So that's what they know. That's what they've been raised on.
Baby 106. Wow. He's going to the wire mother. Stop being little.
But then watch this. So this mother that you see here is made of a super soft cloth. And so one of the things that you'll notice is that, yes, the monkey is going to go to that wire mother for nourishment, but This monkey and many other of these orphan monkeys that Harlow studied are going to spend a good chunk of the rest of the time snuggling up to these cloth mothers that are snuggleable and huggable, even though they don't actually provide any nourishment.
Oh, he's going back. He's back on the cloth mother, and he'll stay on the cloth mother. Actually, this baby spends 17 to 18 hours a day on the cloth mother, less than 1 hour a day on the wire mother.
Okay, so did you hear that? I don't know, like sometimes the noises of the monkey can make that hard. So Harlow reported that most of these monkeys will spend almost 2/3 of their day, 17 to 18 hours on, or actually that's closer to about 75%, on this cloth mother, and they'll maybe only spend about an hour on the wire mother. Now I'm going to show you one other thing, because this is obviously a longer 6-minute video, but I'm gonna show you this instance. So we kind of see that this monkey has probably developed some sort of attachment to the cloth mother. So Harlow creates a situation where he scares the monkey to kind of see which mother the monkey will choose for that comfort in its distress. So I'm going to show you this.
Now, in this experiment, this is the apparatus we use. That looks diabolical. Just the way a baby monkey feels without it.
I think it's kind of cute.
Loud sounds, moving mechanical parts, all of these things are designed to frighten a monkey. Here we have a peaceful, resting baby monkey.
So cute.
Let's find out what his reactions to his mother are when we frighten him.
Here we go.
He's scared, all right. And what a child will do in a similar situation. He runs away. It's more than running away. He was running to his mother.
Okay, so obviously, can you kind of see why you couldn't get away with these kind of studies today? Animals deserve a little bit better than that. But it does show the importance of contact comfort with developing that attachment. And we can use our caregivers as an opportunity to actually be a secure base to help us explore the world. So does a similar attachment occur with humans? And it does. Based on the work of John Bowlby, which was later followed up by Mary Ainsworth, we can actually see differences in how infants are attached to their caregivers. So what we can do is we can assess this with what Mary Ainsworth designed back in the 1960s as the strange situation. So in this particular type of experiment, well, it's not really an experiment. It's more of an observational study than an actual experiment. But infants, usually between the ages of about 12 to 18 months, are brought into a research laboratory with a caregiver. The caregiver is usually a mother. And then at different points, a stranger will come into the room, and we kind of see what the infant does when the stranger is present. And then the mother leaves. And then once the mother leaves, the researchers kind of record what the infant does. The mother returns. And then both the stranger and the mother leave and leave the infant alone for a period of time. Not a very long time, just a few minutes, but for an infant, that is going to feel like agony, being alone like that. And so what Ainsworth and others are trying to do in these studies is look at what happens to these infants when their caregiver leaves, and when their caregiver returns, how quickly are they soothed? So we're going to watch an example of the strange situation, and you can watch this particular infant in this situation. Just as a friendly reminder to you, we do not have class next Friday. So remember, I will be recording class for you because I will be at an interactive workshop that I cannot leave. But if you are still trying to come up with ideas for your Choose Your Own Adventure book, remember that by October 1st, you can email me with information about who you want to work with, or if you'd like to work alone, and what you'd like your book to be about. There are instructions on e-learning, so make sure that you take a look at them. And for those who don't know what Choose Your Own Adventure is, I also give you links so that you can learn. All right, is everybody good here? Okay, so we're going to pause our share. And we're going to go ahead and learn about the strange situation.
But can the essential elements of home life be translated into a standard laboratory setting for controlled scientific studies? After conducting extensive observations of parents and children at home, a student of Bowlby's, Mary Ainsworth, devised such a procedure called the strange situation, which places the child under some stress. It has become the most widely used.
Here, this might help. Yeah, I was going to say the transcript's not getting it. The auto-generated may not either, but we'll try our best. Otherwise, we might end up with a situation like we had on Friday, which I will never forget.
Standardized way to assess the quality of a child's attachment to their caregiver. Here the researchers are recording how 14-month-old Lisa responds in this attractive but unfamiliar setting. How will she react to a stranger? What will happen when her mother leaves the room? And when she returns?
So it says
behavior when her mother returns.
So the caption says the child and mother play together. So that's kind of the first stage.
The psychologists call the reunion that they are particularly interested in.
Most important thing is to look for the type of balance that a child strikes between an attachment need and, on the other hand, to explore the play material.
Once Lisa has settled down to play, a stranger enters the room and sits in a chair reading a magazine. After a couple of minutes, the stranger attempts to interact with Lisa.
Denied.
Soon after, Lisbeth gets a cue to leave the room.
Here we go.
The stranger tries to comfort Lisa, but in vain. Lisbeth comes back into the room, and the camera records how Lisa reacts.
Okay, so really quick, I paused it. Did you see how quickly, as soon as her mother picked her up, the crying stopped? That's good. You want a child that is very quickly soothed like that.
Now the first part of the procedure is over, and Lisbeth settles Lisa down again. The stranger leaves them alone together.
Here we go again.
And soon after, Lisbeth goes too. Lisa is on her own. Her distress is plain to see. Once again, the efforts of the stranger to console you.
Nope.
But Lisbeth manages to calm her almost at once, and shortly afterwards the observation ends. Lisa showed outward signs of what's called secure attachment.
Okay, I thought it was funny that they thought I was playing music when that child was crying. Okay, so that's kind of how the strange situation works. Now, based on the work that Ainsworth did with the strange situation, oh, good, I can get rid of this. Okay. She actually reported that about 60% of the infants that she studied, and thus we can kind of extrapolate to about 60% or 50% of the population. It's either 50 or 60, depending on the researcher, but they display what is referred to as a secure attachment. So the idea behind a secure attachment is that these infants are distressed when their parent leaves, but then are very, very quickly soothed when the parent returns. And then additionally, they are able to explore. And you kind of saw that the child kind of crawled around a bit more and was actually moving around a lot more while her mother was present, because her mother can be that base that allows her to explore, but then return to safety. So about 50% or 60% of people demonstrate a secure attachment. The remaining 40 or 50% have what we call an insecure attachment. Now, Ainsworth said that there were really only 2 other types of insecure attachment. There's actually more, the more that we come to learn about it. So you can have what they refer to as an anxious attachment. This anxious attachment can either be what we call a preoccupied attachment or a fearful attachment. And then we also have an avoidant attachment. There's also another type of attachment that I did not list here called disorganized, that has features of both an anxious attachment and an avoidant attachment. So let's talk about what an anxious attachment looks like. So an anxious attachment kind of looks like this. The child is incredibly distressed when the parent leaves. And then when the caregiver returns, they are very, very difficult to soothe. So they take longer to calm down from that distress. And additionally, they'll have a tendency to want to stay close to their caregiver. They're not going to use the caregiver as a base to explore. They're going to kind of cling. On the other hand, an avoidant attachment is demonstrated in the strange situation by a child that doesn't really seem all that bothered when their caregiver leaves. And when their caregiver comes back, they either are indifferent or they might actually be a little angry. So, secure attachment and insecure attachment, Ainsworth and Bowlby kind of theorized that these attachments happen because of early experiences with our caregivers. We need to feel like we can trust our caregivers and that they can be responsive to our needs. Now, no parent is a perfect parent. Every parent, however well-meaning, is going to make mistakes and may not always be as responsive as you want them to be. But generally, a caregiver that is responsive to their child's needs will help form a basis for a secure attachment. You've realized that your caregiver can be counted on. If you are either unresponsive, so if a caregiver is unresponsive to their child's needs or inconsistent, that's when an insecure attachment will develop. So you'll either get that anxious attachment where you're constantly worried that your caregiver is not going to be there for you, and so you cling, or you don't count on your caregiver to be there for you, and you're avoidant of those sorts of things. And the reason that I bring attachment theory up is because research has found that it has implications for future relationships. Generally speaking, relationships, whether they are with coworkers, romantic relationships, platonic relationships, all of them are built on a foundation of trust. This trust can be formed relatively early with your caregivers because that's the first real relationship you have. And so if you have these insecure attachments, I am not saying it is impossible. I am not saying you're doomed to have bad relationships, but there might be some work that you might have to do to help trust people. Your attachment styles can change throughout life. And odds are pretty good. You have different attachment styles with different people. Like, I've got a pretty good relationship with my mom. Like, my mom has always been there for me. My parents divorced when I was 4. My father was not around very much. My relationship with my father is good now, but when I was younger, it was not so good. So we're kind of working to get that kind of secure attachment in that relationship. So this might cause you to think back on some of the relationships that you've had with your family members and kind of think about, you know, your interactions with them and how this has kind of fostered a sense of either trust or mistrust in those caregivers. But these can have implications for your life. So it's important to identify them. And if your attachment style needs a little bit of work, it is okay to do the work. And there's nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. Okay, so we have to talk about parenting styles. So I actually had a really interesting conversation with my sister yesterday. So in my family, we kind of labor under the mutual delusion that I don't curse. I do not curse in front of you because this is a professional environment. But I also don't curse in front of my family. Now, does that mean that I never curse? Not at all. But I grew up with a very strict mother who, if I even said a word like crap, that was a bad word and not something to say. Now, it's really interesting. I go onto my my niece's Instagram, and she curses like a sailor. My sister goes, "Yeah, I signed her up for driver's ed." And I go, "Yeah, I saw that post. She used some bad language." And my sister goes, "Yeah, she has a potty mouth, but we teach her not to do that at school." And all I can see is that it's kind of a reaction to the way that my mother raised us. My mother was very, very what we call authoritarian. So we have different types of parenting styles. Parents tend to parent in a variety of different ways. And these ways depend on, first of all, whether they are responsive to your needs, if they're willing to compromise and work with you, and also what they expect out of you. So how responsive are they? How much do they expect out of you? So I grew up with a really strict parent. Now, my mother is a good parent. It's hard being in a single parent family. But this was how she parented. I was not allowed to question any of the rules. I had a bedtime of 9 p.m. Probably until I was about maybe 17. Now, to be fair, I did not have to go to sleep by 9 o'clock. I just had to be in my room. And if I tried to question or say, "Can we compromise?" she would say, "I'm the parent, you're the child. What I say goes." And any sort of attempt to try to reason with her was kind of seen as talking back. Now, now let's be clear, I was pretty sassy. Sometimes I actually was talking back because I thought I was smarter than most people, including my mother. I'm not smarter than my mother. My mother is very wise and she's definitely mellowed out with age, but she was pretty strict. This is what we call an authoritarian parent. So authoritarian as in dictatorship. Now, parenting is not a dictatorship, but what do authoritarians typically do? They impose rules, they expect you to obey them, and you don't get to question them. Why? Because I said so is a common refrain of an authoritarian parent. And you'd better believe that as a teenager, that phrase, tore me up. I'm like, so what? Just because you're the parent, everything you say goes? Yeah, unfortunately it does. Okay. So let's kind of contrast an authoritarian parent with a permissive parent. How many of you have seen Mean Girls? How many of you know Regina George's cool mom? That is a permissive parent. Like, there are so many little things in that movie with Regina George's mother that make you see a permissive parent. One of the ones that kind of blew me away when I first watched it was, I wanted a larger room, so my mom gave me their room. Like, she got the master bedroom and they moved into a smaller room for her. In this case, children have demands and parents will submit to them. So, both children of authoritarian parents and permissive parents, they don't necessarily end up okay. So in the case of the children of an authoritarian parent, they're going to be really good at following rules, but they may not necessarily have a very strong sense that they are independent. They're always going to feel like they need somebody to tell them what to do. We also know that children of authoritarian parenting are more likely to struggle with self-esteem issues and self-confidence. If you're a child of a permissive parent, you've probably got a really entitled kid, like a very entitled kid that doesn't know how to hear no, doesn't know how to take criticism and things like that. So what you want is kind of an authoritative parent. So an authoritative, don't get it confused with authoritarian, but an authoritative parent is kind of a mix of permissive and authoritarian parenting. So with authoritative parenting, the parents do expect their children to, listen to them, to do good things, to abide by their rules. However, they are allowed, children in these kind of parenting styles are allowed to question their parents, and parents are going to be responsive. So for example, here's kind of the difference between an authoritarian parent and an authoritative parent. An authoritarian parent will basically be like, you need to be home at 10 o'clock, no exceptions. And if the child tries to argue that they would like to stay out later, the parent's going to be like, no, it's my way or the highway, what I say goes. An authoritative parent would do something like this. They say, okay, can you please be back at 10 o'clock at night? And you could say, well, I haven't really gone out much this week and I do a pretty good job of coming in on time. Is it okay if we extend that by 15 to 30 minutes? And the parent will not necessarily give in to their children, but they'll listen and they'll explain why the rules are there in a way that the authoritarian parent will not. The authoritarian parent will basically be like, I'm the parent, I can do what I want, and I don't have to explain why these rules exist. An authoritative parent is going to meet the child where they are and try to explain and try to compromise. And then finally, one that your book kind of talks about as well are neglectful parents. These parents are neither responsive nor demanding. So children will learn to kind of rely on themselves because they don't have anybody really looking out for their best interest and they don't have anybody telling them how to behave. So they're basically kind of on their own. And you can generally see that out of these different parenting styles, probably a more well-adjusted child is probably going to come from an authoritative home. Now, again, does this mean that if your parents fall into one of these other styles that you're doomed? No, of course not. But it's been really interesting to watch how my sister's parenting style has basically been a reaction to my mother's. Okay, everybody's favorite time. We may not have too much time to finish this, but I think we'll have maybe about a video about 15 minutes. So it should be pretty short that I'll record for you later today. Adolescence and adulthood, everybody's favorite. So we're going to talk about the physical, the cognitive, and the social changes here. We're going to talk about everybody's favorite time, puberty. Yay. My feet grew like 5 sizes in one summer. That's all that happened. And maybe I grew like 3 inches and that's it. Okay. So physical development, adolescence basically begins with puberty. Now, like we saw with motor development, physical development with puberty works in a very similar way. So everybody will go through the same order and sequence of stages, but people will hit those at different points. So for example, for most people assigned female at birth, they are probably going to experience the development of secondary sex characteristics, such as the development of breasts, before they actually start their first period, which is called menarche. Not monarchy, menarche. So that's menarche. So we have these similar sequences of changes. And one of the things that we do know in general is that girls tend to start puberty a little bit sooner than boys do. It's why you get this really weird period in late elementary school and middle school where many of the girls are taller than the boys. And then around 8th or 9th grade, all of a sudden, they're all really tall. And then one of the other things that I will mention, adolescence is also marked by continued growth in the frontal lobes. But the frontal lobe will finish developing in the early to mid-20s. So again, you're going to look back on your teenage years and wonder why you did those things. It's because your frontal lobe wasn't quite finished yet. Does anybody need some more time? Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the cognitive aspects. What you're looking at here on this chart is Kohlberg's stages of moral development. That is going to be in your book. But one of the things that we find is that in general, young adolescents tend to be pretty self-focused. So it's kind of a fun little quirk of our cognitive and social development that as soon as we discover that other people have minds and might have different information than we do, that suddenly they start to wonder if other people are thinking about them. How many times when you were younger, were you out with your parents and you were like, Mom, Dad, you're embarrassing me. They probably weren't embarrassing you and nobody really cared. So one of the things that we do find is that there is that initial self-focus, but that does tend to change with age. Additionally, adolescence is marked by increased reasoning ability. Teenagers are especially good at seeing hypocrisy and pointing it out. When people say one thing and do another, they are also very good at noting flaws in logic and will again let you know. Now, Kohlberg believed that as we get older, we do have changes in moral reasoning. So initially, I'm going to try to keep this pretty short. We're not going to go through this entire table, but initially in infancy and early childhood, we tend to behave in moral ways that are based on self-interest. So we help people or we do good because we want to either avoid punishment or we want a reward. Over time, Kohlberg actually argued that when we are in our childhood age, that oftentimes we are going to follow the rules and behave in good ways and help others because we are trying to be a good person or a good child, or we're going to follow rules. So finally, by teenage years and adulthood, Kohlberg believed that we do start to move towards being a good person, not because of rules or conformity, but because the social contract is a thing. We need to be good to other people because they are human beings with inherent worth and dignity, and we live in a society. I'm sorry, I had to say it. Now, Kohlberg did say that in adulthood, you could actually begin to devise your own moral code, your own personal sense of integrity. But he believed that very, very few people actually made it to that point. So it's less about what's proper for the greater good, and it's more about your own individual morality. Now, one thing I will mention with Kohlberg's research, he did a lot of this research on boys and men. He didn't necessarily do a lot of research looking at women. And so he believed that most men in adulthood began to exhibit a greater emphasis on individual morality, transcending general society. But he believed that women were kind of stuck in the social contract idea of morality, where we live in a society, we need to be good to people. Other people have suggested that women do reason a little bit differently, but that doesn't make it immature. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here. I will talk a little bit about identity formation and peer influence in adolescence. I will also talk about emerging adulthood. You should also read that in your book because it is going to be a short answer question. But I will kind of finish this up for you. Hopefully it won't take more than 20 minutes, and I'll send you a YouTube link. The captions might not be available right away, but I'll try to get them as quick as I can. Have a great day, everybody. And I will see you tomorrow night at 6:45 for a review session right here in the student lounge. Bye, everybody.